Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this introduction to the REC webinar. Pleasure to be joined by so many of you today. I hope this session will provide you with a ton of useful information to help understand the Retail Energy Code and get the most out of the services that the REC Code Manager offers. On this next slide, a bit of a spoiler for all the lovely people you're going to hear from over the course of the next 2 or so hours. Between us, we cover the breadth of the Code Manager team, and we'll each explain our roles in a little more detail as we go. As far as I go, my name's Paul Rock, and I'm the Head of Communications within the Code Manager team. I'm responsible for making sure that the right messages are sent out to the right people at the right times. And I do this by defining a strategy and maintaining our comms toolkit. Someone who isn't presenting today but is still providing a vital role behind the scenes is Amelia Bray, sitting opposite me. She's my comms manager and she's ensuring that everything runs smoothly throughout this morning. All right, before we get stuck in, let's cover some basic housekeeping. Most of you have figured out already that we would prefer you to keep microphones and cameras switched off today, unless, of course, you're one of our presenters. Please note that as per all our Code Manager events, we are recording today's session and we'll be uploading the recording to our YouTube channel so that anyone who wasn't able to attend can still catch up on the materials. We'll share a link to the recording and a copy of the slide deck on the REC portal in the next few days. Now, Slido is an audience participation tool that we use to seek your feedback throughout our events, as well as manage your questions as they come in. In a moment, I'll be sharing a link to a QR code, which you can scan to bring up our Slido room on your smartphone. Please do use Slido to raise your questions, and we'll break at appropriate points in the agenda to field the questions to our speakers. The Slido isn't working right now, but I will resolve that in a second. I've also put, though, in the chat while I'm working to resolve that. I'm going to stop sharing a second. I've put in the meeting chat a code for you to be able to log on via slido.com. Yep, I know what I need to know. You can log on to slido.com and enter a room code there, and that will get you in same element as well. I think I should have resolved the problem now. I'm just checking. There we go. Share my screen again. Apologies. There we go. So as I said, that's the QR code that you can use, scan via your smartphone's camera app to access our Slido room. All right. So all you need to do, I'd prefer if you could check now that you can access Slido and join the room by entering your name. And I'll leave this up for just a few more seconds in case you're trying to locate your phone. We'll show the QR code again later when we have specific polls for you to complete. All right, fantastic. Let's move on. Okay, on this slide is a reminder of today's agenda. I'll be kicking off by giving us an overview of the scope and background of the REC, types of REC party, an overview of what we, the Code Manager, do, and the services we provide. And then my colleague Shelley will take you through the role of our operational account managers and an overview of the service desk, before Amy and Nirav provide an explanation of what we mean by performance assurance in the context of the REC, followed by a short comfort break. Then Elise and James will talk through the REC change process and how you can stay informed and engaged. Roz will provide some background to the digital REC, and Harriet will, at a high level, talk about how the REC is supporting the industry-wide programme to implement market-wide half-hourly settlement. Then we'll come full circle back round to me, and I'll wrap up by reminding you about all the ways you can stay engaged with us after today's session. We have a dedicated questions slot at the end, but as I said before, we'll be breaking for questions following each agenda item to those questions that have been raised on Slido. All right, without further ado, let's press on to provide you with an introduction to the REC. My first port of call here is to test how many of you were successful in accessing Slido before. Fear not, you can still scan the QR code there now to get to where you need to be. So I've launched a poll to get a perspective of how well you think you understand the REC coming into this session. I'll give you a few seconds to get back onto your phones and provide your answers. Right, 17 responses, 18 responses. Looks like a good number of you have figured it out. This is good to see. And it's also good to see that the majority of you are not already feeling like you're experts in the REC. Otherwise, I'd have told you that you come to the wrong place. Because just as a reminder, the information we're going to provide you with over the course of this morning is targeted at people who are new to the REC or want a reminder of the basic fundamentals. If you've got questions that get into some quite deep subject matter areas today, please do accept my apologies in advance if we decide to take them away and provide you with answers after the session, as we really want to maximize the time we have here today to provide that overview level insight for all the people on the call. All right. Okay, very briefly, where did the REC come from? Why is it here today? So the full Retail Energy Code arrangements became live on the 1st of September 2021. The code manager was established, change governance processes went live, and obligations in legacy code arrangements were switched off and transferred over to the REC. But actually, that milestone was go live for REC version 2, and plenty had already happened to get to that point in the life cycle of the code. Way back in 1998, at the point the energy retail market was opened up to privatisation, industry codes were required to facilitate the change of supplier processes. The Master Registration Agreement, or MRA, in electricity, the Supply Point Administration Agreement, SPA, in gas, supported the market and the consumer for over 20 years as part of a wider codes infrastructure. But over time, and with the Ofgem faster switching programme as a specific catalyst, it was identified that the code arrangements could be improved. So the Retail Energy Code was designed to bring the MRA and SPA together into a streamlined dual fuel code, which would more effectively support parties understand and meet their obligations. And the REC would also incorporate safety and technical metering obligations previously housed in the codes called MCOPA, MCOP, AMICOP, and SMECOP. And critically, it would also provide a contracting vehicle for the new central switching service provider required for the faster switching arrangements to succeed. Now, the REC continues to evolve to meet wider industry requirements and support the consumer. And later today, we'll talk about the next major evolution of the REC to facilitate the market-wide half-hourly settlement programme. Well, now we understand where the REC came from, let's take a look at which type of parties it covers. The top 4 lines on this list are fairly self-explanatory. As a dual fuel code, the REC places obligations on suppliers and the networks across both gas and electricity. And the REC introduced a new definition for the metering equipment manager. Previously, MEMS had different names within legacy codes and fuels, such as meter operators in electricity and meter asset managers in gas, but the MEM is now the standardized and fuel agnostic term within the REC. RECO and the Data Communications Company as REC parties are slightly unique cases. However, they are required to be parties as the code does place obligations on them. RECO in its oversight role, which I'll come on to soon, and the DCC as the central switching service provider with its role in the switching process. As parties, all companies that have a license to operate in one of the categories on the screen must comply with the REC and has their performance assured by the code manager to maintain their ongoing qualification. And on this slide, we have a non-exhaustive list of the principal operational areas that the REC covers. And with a click, the different REC schedules that contain all the obligations that parties must comply with to ensure they're meeting the requirements of the REC in those areas. These aren't all the schedules to the REC, probably tell by the missing numbers. They're also more process and governance driven documents that cover things like accession to the code, the change management process and company governance. If you go into any of the schedules, you'll find a table on the first page which explains what type of party have requirements put on them within that document. For example, if we take Schedule 7, the Energy Theft Reduction Schedule, it presents that there are mandatory obligations within it for domestic and non-domestic suppliers, gas transporters and electricity network operators, but not on MEMS or the DCC. It can be a useful tool for you to quickly assess whether a document is something you need a thorough understanding of. So what are these documents all about? Schedule 7 sets out aspects relating to energy theft, including how REC parties interact with the Energy Theft Tip-Off Service, or ETOS, and how the process for the Energy Theft Detection Incentive Scheme works. Schedule 11 covers requirements for suppliers relating to managing customers on prepayment meters. Schedule 12 sets out the details of how access is granted to the electricity and gas inquiry services and the obligations on REC parties to make data available into those services. Schedule 17 sets out how electricity parties use the Secure Data Exchange Service, or SDES, to communicate personal data related to consumers with each other, while Schedule 13 is specifically concerned with the exchange of priority services register data and consumer contact data. Schedule 14 sets out obligations on how meter equipment managers interface with suppliers and network operators, including the processes for becoming a qualified MEM. Though rather less impactful than it once was, Schedule 18 sets out the arrangements for suppliers responsible for the management of Green Deal plans on the Green Deal Central Charge Database, or GDCC. Schedule 23 sets out the process for the management of customer registration and switching requests. And Schedules 24 to 28 were all introduced in 2022 to introduce the central switching service arrangements, which underpin faster switching. Schedule 30 places requirements on parties across a whole host of issues that consumers face when trying to switch supplier, including erroneous switches, crossed meters, duplicate meters, and misdirected prepayments. And the newest schedule, Schedule 31, sets out how suppliers submit data and make and receive payments in respect to the prepayment levelization process introduced by Ofgem this year. In addition to all the schedules and the main body of the REC, there are also a number of user guides and operational and guidance documents to support people using the REC. All of these can be found on the REC documents area on the REC portal. More on the portal a little later. Okay, now by now you've heard me speak a lot about the REC Code Manager, but it's likely you've also heard about RECO a fair amount too, and there can be some confusion about the difference between the two. But put very simply, RECO, or the Retail Energy Company, is a limited company set up with the objective of facilitating the smooth and efficient running of the retail energy market. And to achieve this with respect to the code management processes, RECO contracts with the REC Code Manager, that's me and my colleagues. RECO also contracts with other organisations, such as the inquiry services technical providers. But for the most part, as REC parties, your primary point of contact into the REC will be through the Code Manager. And on this slide, I've listed many of the key services that the Code Manager provides to you. And let's start from the top. So the Code Manager runs the change management process that allows the code to evolve to meet changing industry requirements. We facilitate the means for anybody to raise an issue or opportunity into the Code Manager, and we act as a critical friend to support them through the process. We run consultations and impact assessments, providing timely information to ensure that industry is well aware of what change is coming in to updated versions of the code. And we'll hear a lot more about the change process and how you can expect to engage and be engaged later in today's session. Code Manager also provides the service known as the Energy Market Architecture Service, or EMAR, incorporating the Digital Navigator and the AI tool Erin. These are all highly functional tools to improve the digital experience of accessing REC artifacts and information. And Roz is going to give us all a proper overview of these elements later on. And following that theme, Amy and Nirav will be able to explain much more competently than me the role that the Code Manager carries out to assure performance of industry parties and service providers, working to monitor market risks, assess data, and take action to remedy the performance of those falling shy of performance expectations. While we won't focus on the next two rows in too much detail today, it's worth flagging that the Code Manager runs the processes by which organisations apply to become REC parties or service users, and also supports parties looking to voluntarily exit the market, making sure that the customer is protected and disruption is minimised at all stages of such a process. And the sandbox and derogation process allows a code party to apply to the code manager for a relaxation of specific obligations for a limited period of time and under certain controls. This might be to allow that party to test a new innovative product or service, which wouldn't currently be permissible under the code, but could ultimately provide significant consumer value, and that's called a sandbox. Or perhaps an unforeseen issue has led to a party not being able to implement a new change in time for its go live date, and in that case, a party would need to apply for a derogation. And sandbox and derogation requests are managed by the code manager and heard by one of our committees known as the REC Performance Assurance Board. Moving on, the operational account managers are one of the most important methods of engagement between the code manager and REC parties and service users. So every party is provided with access to a friendly face to help them deal with the REC, and I'll let Shelley speak more about that later. And all of the code manager services are facilitated by our online platform known as the REC Portal. There's a good chance you've already visited the REC Portal, as it's where we held the sign-up information for this event. But on the next slides, I'll give you a little more detail about this service. So here it is, the REC Portal in all its glory. This is the homepage of the REC Portal. We know it as the dashboard. You can see I'm in the top right corner, I'm logged in as my photo and name are appearing up there. And next to my photo, you can see a bell icon with a number next to it. And these are my notifications. And I can't because it's a screenshot, but if I was to click on the bell, I'd see messages generated by the portal to tell me about certain events that have happened, such as change documents being published or a performance assurance task that's required to be completed. You have the ability to tailor how certain notifications are received, and you can choose to receive emails instead of or in addition to being notified by the bell. Other features of the dashboard then, you can see in the middle of the screen the large news carousel, which allows you to scroll through the 3 most recent articles of news content uploaded by the code manager. If there's a particularly key message the code manager needs to communicate to portal users, you might also see that alert banner at the top of the page there. And then further down the page towards the bottom and below where you can see, you can find useful links to resources both within the portal and from relevant external sources too. I'd draw your attention to the REC documents link under the REC information box. That's how you'll navigate to download PDF copies of the REC and the REC schedules. And a useful tool as well as the search bar at the top. It allows you to search for key terms, locate documents that are stored on the portal. Now the left-hand menu, the vertical menu on the left, provides you with access to some of the most important areas of the portal. I'll talk through these in turn, but party operations is where all the performance assurance information lives, and also where people can go to start a new application or withdraw from the REC. It also hosts the REC party register, which lists all accredited parties and provides a contact detail for your named contract manager, or all parties named contract manager, which is quite a useful resource. The change and release menu item takes you straight into our Change Hub, where you can access a register of all REC changes. You can raise a new issue, respond to a consultation, or see what changes are due to be implemented in an upcoming release, and more on that later. Committees allows you to access workspaces for each of our REC committees, where nominated representatives meet on a regular basis to make decisions related to REC change and performance assurance. Here you can access agendas, papers, and minutes from meetings, take a look at upcoming schedules of meetings, and find out who the members are. And if you happen to be a member of a committee yourself, you'll see a little more functionality, including a collaboration space, which is like a forum that we use to have discussions between committee members outside of meetings. REC Wiki and Service Desk next. So we've tried to create our own version of Wikipedia for the REC portal, essentially hundreds of articles about processes, documents, and terms you come across in the REC, as well as an acronym buster page. Please do check it out and let us know if you think of any articles that would be useful to add. We're building to the wiki all the time, and we aim to make as much information as easy to self-serve as possible. But if you can't find what you need, then you can raise a ticket into our service desk through that same area, where our 2 Lauras are waiting to answer your questions. You'll also notice at the bottom right of the page and bottom right of every portal page, a Let's Chat button. It gets you straight into that same service desk team quicker. So for simpler questions, you might get a very rapid answer by clicking on that button and asking your question through the live chat. Now, finally, on the left-hand menu, you've got EMAR, Digital Rec, data specification, and Erin as well. Both of those links take you to the same EMAR environment that Ros will speak through in detail later. And you'll need to be signed into your Rec Portal account to get into those links. So now will be a good time to show you how to sign up to the portal if you haven't already done so. So the first time you come to the Rec Portal, you won't see your photo in the top right-hand corner, or my photo for that matter. Instead, you'll see a sign-in button. Click it, and if you need to create an account, you select to sign up now, as you can see on the picture on the left there. And that will bring up this wizard on the right, which is really simple to go through. A quick verification with your email address and your account's good to go. New accounts have quite basic features, but it does allow you access to all the documents on the portal pretty much. But if you have a role that requires you to carry out specific functions on the portal, particularly those associated with uploading performance assurance data, you'll need to get in touch with your organization's contract manager, who can associate you to the right organization and provide you with the right roles as well. So back to Slido, and I'm interested. How many people on the call are already set up on the portal, and how many haven't got round to it yet? Poll's now live, so if you go back to your smartphones, you'll be able to fill it in. All right. If you don't think you need an account, I'd still recommend you consider signing up. It does make it much easier to access information from change and committees, as well as being able to access that market information on EMAR that you need a portal account to be able to get into as well. But it's good to see that most of you on the call today are already signed up for your portal account. If you are ever having any issues using the portal, you're struggling to navigate, do just get in touch via the service desk or that live chat, and the team will be more than happy to help you out as well. All right, it's almost time for me to stop talking. This is my last slide. And on this last slide, I've referred to a number of rec services and tools that you might well be familiar with. We host user guides for each of these services on the Rec Portal under the Rec Documents page, and we facilitate the process for parties wanting to apply for access. The services aren't directly provided by the Code Manager, but we can still help you find information or point you in the right direction. I won't go through them all in detail, but essentially you've got the inquiry services, which provides a portal into information about every MPXN for electricity and gas across GB. We'll attach the secure data exchange services is around the facilitation of communication sent between parties in a secure manner for electricity. Green Deal Central Charge obviously is for management of Green Deal plans for those who are still responsible for plans. Energy theft tip-off service around the receipt of reports into potential energy theft, and the central switching service there to facilitate the switching process as well. But as I said, we're not going into detail. All the user guides are there on the portal for you to access if you've got more in-depth questions about any of those. But that is me for the time being done. Before I do hand over to my colleague, just break and see if there's been any questions asked on Slido. Sorry?
One, but I replied to it.
There has been one, and apparently it has already been responded to. Let me just see what that was. The question was, will the slides be available after the session? I think I mentioned at the start, yes, we will. We will be. She's put a slide. There we go. There we go. Yes, they will be available after the session. We will share a copy of the slides with the recording from today's session onto the Rec Portal via the wiki page, and also put that in the Rec Weekly Bulletin, so the parties who weren't able to attend have got a copy of those as well. Fabulous. There is, as I said, a Q&A session at the end of the day as well. So if you've got questions, plenty of chance to ask your questions, and I'll be sticking around throughout the whole event to facilitate. But for the time being, I am going to mute myself and hand over to my colleague Shelley, who's going to talk to us all about the operation of the what is it? Stakeholder engagement processes under the REC. There we go, Shelley.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. As Paul said, my name is Shelley Roush. I'm head of stakeholder engagement under the REC. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how stakeholder engagement works for us. So if I can have the first slide, please. Okay. So under the REC, we designed stakeholder engagement in a way that is quite flexible and enables us to provide a range of options for engagement with parties. And we're very aware that there is a wide range of organisations that interact with the REC of different sizes. So for REC parties, we're very aware that a meter installer would have very different engagement needs to maybe a supplier or a network operator. So stakeholder engagement is designed to give you that flexibility to engage in the way that works best for you. So on the screen here, I've tried to highlight some of the options that are available. So operational account manager, Paul talked about that briefly. So the operational account management team is a team of industry experts with a wide range of experience who are allocated to every party under the REC. So when you accede as a party, you're nominated or allocated an account manager who's there to help you throughout. So account managers appointed to all parties, but also service users and voluntary code of practice TPIs. The operational account management team also run a monthly meeting, so the REC issues group, which is exactly that, an open forum where organisations can come along, ask questions, hear answers from colleagues as well as the code managers. So it's a really useful kind of open discussion group. We also have the REC service desk, and the service desk also manage the web chat and the phone and the service desk ticketing. So that's a way for you to interact with the code and get answers to queries and questions from across the code manager. And then, as Paul already explained, we have the REC portal, which is really the home of the digital REC. All of the resources are there, so the code documents themselves, as well as the wiki, as Paul said, user guides, Erin, which is an AI tool for asking questions, and then hubs for specific query types. And then you're also able to sign up for different types of communication. So there's bulletins that come out weekly, so a general bulletin and one from the change team, as well as if you're associated with any committees, you'll have information coming to you from those. And then we also publish a lot of user guides and then webinars such as this and training type activities and videos, as well as podcasts. There's quite a lot going on. So if can I have the next slide, please? So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the stakeholder engagement team. So under operational account management, you'll see a list of names there on the very far left. So those are the operational account managers for the REC parties. So if you're a supplier, a distributor, or a MEM, then you will be working with one of those on that list. If you need to find out who that person is for you, then the party register on the REC portal does have that list available. So who's allocated to which REC party, or the service desk will be able to help you out there. Then we also have a further 2 OEMs who specifically have the expertise to work with the service users and the code of practice TPIs. So 2 working there, and then the Laura's on the service desk. Not obligatory that your name's Laura, but it helps to be manning the service desk. So that's the team. And here to help you should you need us. And if we could just have the final slide from me. So just wanted to talk to you in a little bit more detail about how the operational account management team works. So as I said before, every organisation that works with the REC would have an account manager allocated to them, and that happens at the point of application. So as soon as you approach the REC, the team will get in touch, your account manager is allocated, and we're there to help you throughout your journey. So from market entry, qualification or accreditation, all the way through to whenever your time with the REC ends. How that relationship works is entirely up to you. I would highly recommend that you accept the welcome meeting, so the first meeting that would be offered. And at that meeting is where the OAM can really point you into the direction of travel and point out all of the options available to you. There is, of course, the option to meet much more frequently with your OAM. We find on average, most parties opt to meet with their OAM once a month. So we can give you a good overview of what's happened the month before, what's going on the next month, and ensure that you're all set and ready to go. The things that the OAM can help you with, obviously the welcome meeting, as I've highlighted there. Rec portal navigation, there's a few pages on the portal that you will need to interact with on a regular basis, I guess primarily the performance assurance areas, so we can work with you to make sure that you have the appropriate contacts within your organisation set up with the appropriate levels of access, and we can talk you through the screens and how things work, so you can opt to self-serve there as much as possible. And we also can support you through your market entry or qualification journey. We work really closely with the other code manager teams, so with performance assurance and the market entry teams, we can work with you there. As I said, regular catch-ups are really useful, as frequent or as infrequent as you like, but I would encourage you to kind of use the OAMs as much as you can. Portal setup, as I've explained, obviously we're there to help point you in whatever direction you want to go. So if you're looking for documents, use the guides, we can help you there. Operational contacts, so there is a requirement under the REC for some role types to provide contacts and maintain those contacts, so the OAMs can really help you with making sure that you have the right names in the right place for the right people. And of course, performance assurance and reporting, we're there to support you with that if needs be. So I think that's that from me. I don't know if there's any questions on stakeholder engagement.
So I think we have just one question more to do, I think, around my presentation from before, and that's whether we talk a little more about the relationship between the REC code manager and Reco. Not sure if there's any sort of specific question or point that you had there, Kwaku, but I think in layman's terms, as I said, Reco is very much the company, the limited company set up to oversee the retail energy market arrangements. We have a contract as the code manager into Reco. Reco makes sure that we deliver the code management services to parties. We have a contract with them, and we have a process for changing that contract as well. So if the code market evolves and we are required to do something slightly different in terms of how we deliver to parties, then Reco can amend that contract with us as well. Reco define the budget for the overall delivery of the REC service, and so the invoices that are payable by the REC parties, suppliers into the code is done through Reco. But day to day, in terms of your experience and how you're interacting with the code, will all be done through the code manager. It's just that Reco are there to help define the strategy for how that service is delivered. Hopefully that goes a bit more into answering your question, but if you've got anything particular that you want to ask, then do feel free to elaborate on that. I do want to apologise as well for a little bit of a technical problem when I stopped speaking. For some reason, my laptop wasn't playing ball and decided it wasn't going to mute its sound, so we had a bit of echo for a brief period of time, but hopefully that's all been resolved now. All right, no more questions for the time. Kwaku's asked as well, helpful to know that we have access to OAMs. Along with monthly meetings, are there any other suggestions on how to best maximise the OAMs?
I would say work with your OAM, Kwaku. We're there to help you in whichever way we can. So if monthly meetings are too infrequent, we do have parties that we meet with much more regularly, but also, we're available on demand. So don't be shy in emailing or messaging through to your OAM. That relationship really is yours to build in whichever way works best for you. So yeah, use them as you see fit.
Thank you very much, Shelley. Appreciate that, and thank you for your questions, Kwaku. Okay, we're going to move on with the slides now, and I'm going to be heading over to my colleagues from the performance assurance team, Amy and Nirav. Hopefully they're on the call and coming to cameras if they're not already. I can't see at the moment because I've got the screen up, but hopefully you're here and take it away, guys.
Hi, Amy. Just checking that you can start. I think maybe Amy might be having some technical difficulties with her Teams, but she'll be kicking off the next part of the presentation. If we just give her a minute, hopefully she'll join back in.
Nirav, do you think would it make sense to do your slides while we're waiting for her, or would it make more sense? Would that be out of context without Amy's slides coming first?
It might be a little out of context.
We'll give Amy
hopefully
30 seconds and see where we go.
Apologies
hi,
on that. I was waiting patiently. As soon as I clicked off mute and camera, decided to crash. So apologies on that one. I'm not sure if Nirav went into anything, but happy to kind of start from the beginning.
No, we were waiting for you. You're back now.
Thank you, Paul. So to give just a quick intro to myself, my name's Amy Crow-Lamont. I'm a code manager under the REC and work closely with Nirav in our performance assurance team. So today we just wanted to run through a couple of key themes, one being kind of what is performance assurance and how would we interact with you? How can you maintain your qualification, and then going into some more of the how we actually get the data and how you can actually see your data on your dashboard. So if we can just pop to the next slide. As Paul at the beginning of the session kind of alluded to, but just wanted to do a quick reminder kind of to what to kind of the background of the code. So it was actually in 2017, Ofgem decided to merge pre-existing codes. So I'm not sure if any of people are familiar with the MRA and the SPA. So to merge those existing retail codes to strengthen them. And one of the key parts of this was establishing the code manager to really drive improvements with one of the services being performance assurance. This was to really build, credibility and trust within the arrangements. Now, the purpose of performance assurance really exists to just work out which bits are working in the industry and which bits aren't working, and potentially why this could be. And then, as the code manager, we would intervene to hopefully really drive improvements in those areas that might not be working so well. So how do we do this? Performance assurance. So we follow a risk management framework, which I'll show you in a bit. This is to really act to drive improvements for all market participants and try and build a standardized process for that. This also looks at the performance of service providers or issues in the code that we need to address. If you could just pop onto the next slide. So as I alluded to earlier, there's that risk management framework. So this is our methodology here. Now, I won't go into too much detail, and there will be a slide at the end with loads of useful links to our user guides, which you can refer to later on. But I just wanted to highlight performance assurance. We focus on risks to retail energy consumer outcomes and the effectiveness of the retail market. And this is provided through our performance assurance framework, and it's underpinned by a risk register. And it's associated with when we need to intervene. And we would intervene through something called our performance assurance techniques. Now, it's really key for us to understand what's causing these issues and how we can build solutions to the issues to really drive performance and gain confidence in the market's performance. And through this, we would want to provide transparency to it, and Nirav will go on later how we provide that through our dashboards. if you just move on to the next slide. Now, this just briefly shows us our performance assurance techniques. Now, this is where we would, identify an issue, and this is what techniques we would use to intervene to drive performance. Now, I'll just pull out a couple of ones that we frequently use. So we engage with parties a lot through maybe inquiries, and this is literally just a touch point saying, hey, do you know what's going on here? How's everything going? Is there anything we need to be aware of? And then there's one, request for information. Now, this is very different from the Ofgem request for information, and is just a light touch. Can sometimes cause a little bit of confusion because it does have the same name, but it is just that light touch performance assurance technique to say, hey, what's going on here? Do you need any support? Is there any confusion of what the process actually is? Another one which we interact with parties a lot is on action plans. So we can build an action plan with you to monitor performance and drive improvement in a timely manner as well. Now, another one is notifications. Lastly, notifications. So this is, again, a light touch performance assurance technique, giving a nudge. And we feel in most cases, we really feel that building, that relationship with the party, educating them on what the process is, that's probably how we really do drive performance in that area. And we liaise a lot with your operational account managers as well. So maybe we might pop into one of your meetings and run through something with you. So yeah, there is that close relationship with the operational account managers and the performance assurance team to really drive improvement there. I think the next one's my last slide. So how do you maintain your qualification? So once you've kind of gone through the market entry process, if you need to go through that, you've become qualified, acceded to the REC, and everything's great, and you're on the party register, there's an annual requirement to maintain your qualification. Now, these are through a couple of things that you would need to submit. So the first off being an annual statement. Now, this is just a quick check off, quick signature to say, yes, I'm still compliant with the code. Haven't had any changes in our systems or anything like that. We're still kind of operating as normal. Then there's a compliance statement, which is a very, very light touch information security and data protection assessment, which you would do alongside your annual statement. And then once every 3 years, we do ask parties to do an external assessment. Now, this is the same. It is an information security and data protection assessment. However, it is a bit more in depth, I would say. Then there's also our system of process change disclosure forms, which you can kind of fill out throughout the year whenever you want, or you can align it when you do your annual statement. And this is if you've had any changes in your organization that could have a customer impact. So, for instance, change of billing system or something like that, or you're doing a migration across MPIDs. Now, the system or process change disclosure form, that's not mandatory each year. It's just kind of on an ad hoc basis if you did have anything going on. So yeah, that's a bit about what performance assurance is and why we do it. I'll pass over to Nirav now, who is also on the performance assurance team, to run through more of the data and analytics side of things.
Thanks very much, Amy. Yeah, by way of quick introduction, my name is Nirav Vyas. I also work with Amy, as she's mentioned. I focus a little bit more on the data analytics as part of performance assurance. And what I wanted to go through is the performance assurance catalogue, or the performance assurance reporting catalogue, or the PARC. So on the next slide, please. What I just wanted to, I guess, just intro what the PARC is as part of the performance assurance function, we need to be able to understand how parties are performing in the industry. And the way we do that is by gathering data. So the park is a collection of reports and data items that are collected by the code manager from rec parties as well as other industry participants. It's created so that organizations have a single place to look and understand what information they need to regularly share with the code manager. The data items are listed within the catalog are driven by the performance assurance framework, and in particular the risk register or the retail risk register. The data items are used to measure performance against risks that are defined in the register, as well as monitor market trends. There's also specific monitoring requirements we have as well that are defined in the rec that the code manager also needs to complete. So things like we will collect theft reporting data. The park itself has been recently updated, so end of March, on the 28th of March. And what we wanted to do is basically streamline the data submission requirements and basically simplify the files to make it easier for parties to submit data. We've done that as a way to make sure that parties can be able to provide the data in as a simplified or a streamlined format as possible, and we can then be able to get that data in the most efficient way possible. What I also, I guess, wanted to add was the park has requirements based on your party role, so whether that's a supplier, whether you're a distributor, or whether you're a MEM, and you can filter the park by organization type to understand what you need to report on. The park also contains details around the format of the data that you need to be able to provide, as well as the frequency of those data submissions. We've got a park wiki on the rec portal that provides more information on this and how to submit this data. And what I also say is, if you've got any queries about this, please speak to your OAM in the first instance. I wanted to move on to dashboards. So to start off, to navigate to the dashboards, the way to do it is by logging into the rec portal, as Paul showed you, clicking on your party operations button, and then clicking on performance assurance, selecting your organization, and then going into your performance assurance dashboard that's built for your organization.
Worth noting, though, that you'll only be able to see that option if you have been assigned with a performance assurance role. I mentioned before, the first time you sign up for a portal account, unless you are specifically given that role by your contract manager, you won't be associated with an organisation, and therefore won't be able to access that performance assurance role. If this is something you need to do as part of your job role, it's something your contract manager needs to assign you with the portal. Any issues understanding that process, get in touch with the service desk, and we can help you make sure you got the right access if this is something you require.
Thanks, Paul. So the dashboards provide parties and service providers visibility of the data that's used as part of our performance assurance activities. So transparency, transparency, performance monitoring and reporting is fundamental element of how we do our performance assurance. And the self-service dashboards within the portal is our preferred way of providing this visibility. There's different topic areas that apply to different organizations, and all of these are organized into different tabs. So just to kind of name a few, there's a few different tabs that you can see in your party dashboard. So you've got your overall tab, which kind of gives you a rate that gives you an indication of how you're performing against other parties. There's a retail risk and driver summary tabs that show how you as a party are performing against the retail risks. There's also a peer comparison tab that talks about how you're ranking against your peers. There's also a couple of tabs around theft as well that shows how what your targets are for theft investigations and submitting confirmed thefts, and what progress you've made against reaching your targets. There's also, so what we also do is provide drill down information in the dashboards themselves. Some at an MPXN level where you can gain further information on your performance. There's also functionality in the dashboard to be able to export that information. So if you wanted to do further investigations analysis on what you've seen in the dashboard, you can also do that. Most importantly, we use the dashboards, or we use the dashboards to be able to understand how well parties are performing against rec obligations, which rec processes are being followed, and identify any outliers. And that's where the dashboards come in, identifying the outliers to assess if any actions need to be taken to address any issues. On the next slide, what I just wanted to highlight was, so depending on the user that you are, you may get a different view of the dashboard. So that's what this table is just highlighting. So much of the content in the dashboard is focused on if you're a supplier user, so as an energy supplier. So there you'll be able to see things like your performance against risks, a peer comparison, whether there's any performance assurance techniques that have been applied against your organization, your kind of theft submissions, your smart meter installation survey results, as well as data cleansing as well. There's also other parts to the dashboards, whether you're a distributor or an electricity MEM, you can also see a subset of this information as well. The dashboards are also designed to be able to show performance for other rec service providers. So there's a part of there's another section of the dashboards that talk about the SLAs that are defined within the rec for service providers. There's also parts of the dashboard that if you are a PAB member, so Performance Assurance Board member, or another member of the Code Managers team, there's also a view for you there. And we've also got a public version of the dashboards, which highlights the smart meter installation survey performance, as well as an anonymized version of peer comparison. On my last slide, I've just got a couple of screenshots that I just wanted to talk through at a high level. So the two screenshots that I've got here of the dashboards are the retail risk summary and the the risk driver summary. So this is providing parties information on their performance against risks. On the top left, the retail risk summary goes through at a high level your kind of a summary of your position against all the retail risks. So not going into too much detail, but in the slide, in the screenshot itself, you've got your overview of what your retail risks are, where you sit in terms of are there any cases where you're actually above the threshold allowed for those risks, and how you've and then basically how you trended, or what your historical performance has been over time. If you wanted further information or kind of a further drill down into that, you've got your risk driver summary, which is the screenshot on the bottom right. This effectively provides you further information on the different risks that I've highlighted. So basically, you can take a further look into what your performance looks like. The screenshot on the bottom right, the risk driver summary, is actually in the process of being updated at the moment. So it's going to look a little different next week. What we're going to do is provide communications to the industry to basically describe what the changes are, as well as updating the relevant guidance documents that we have. And just on kind of talking about the guidance documents, we do have a dashboard wiki page on the REC portal, so that provides further information on the dashboards, and there's also videos on the dashboard wiki page that actually walk through the different tabs and then provide any additional information in those videos as well. That was everything I had. I think our next, if I hand back to Paul, I think our next section was around a Q&A session.
Yes, indeed. No questions raised yet. Thank you for that, Nirav. We'll just give anyone a chance to ask any questions just briefly before we do head off into our break. After the break, we'll be hearing more around the REC change process, and also the digital REC as well. No question for the time being. Obviously, feel free to ask questions throughout the session. Quick question before we do break from Kwaku. Quick question: could you talk more about escalations, Nirav? Whether it's here at Nirav or Amy, is it probably?
Yeah, so there is an escalations process in the REC. So kind of if you're having any troubles with potentially another organisation, or you need to escalate something, you can raise this, and we will work closely with the OAM of both parties to try and resolve this. We usually try and do it maybe in like a tri-party call. We all jump on a call and resolve it that way. If an issue can't be resolved that way, then we do have the varies to escalate that to our performance assurance board as well, where they can take further action, and potentially we might need to intervene with a performance assurance technique and issue that to the parties. But usually what we really try and do in the first instance is resolve any issues with the party and get the OAM on board as well to resolve that. I hope that answered your question.
Thanks, Amy, and thank you for the question as well. Okay, we are going to take a short break. We'll be back on the call, please, for 11:10. Please feel free to go and get yourself a cup of coffee, and we'll see you for an update on the change process at 11:10. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Paul. So if we move on to the first slide, so I'm Elise Handy and I am a change analyst as part of the REC Code Manager. So the first item we're going to talk about is what the change team actually does. So we work with the other areas of the Code Manager, and we aim to strive to achieve a fair and transparent change process for all stakeholders, and making sure that consumer outcomes are at the heart of everything that we do. So we, as a change proposal or a change issue comes to us, we then validate that issue and make sure that it has a reasonable prospect of success to move through the process. And once it's determined that it can be progressed, we make a plan for that progression, and then we determine a responsible committee. So under the REC, we have certain expert panels, and depending on the nature of the change, it would go to the panel that has the right expertise. We will work to develop the appropriate solutions to address the problem statement of that change proposal or issue, and we assess this with relevant service providers. And also, because we want industry to engage with us, we ensure that the appropriate documentation, details is all published on the REC portal to make sure that you can engage appropriately. We have certain reports where you can comment on, there's consultations, impact assessments, etc. So at any stage of the process, you'll be able to get in touch with us to feedback on that solution. And we then need to impartially weigh up the pros and cons of that solution. So all the analysis that we've done, we develop a business case, get stakeholder feedback, and then make a determination on whether it should be accepted and implemented into release or rejected as a change. And then other areas of our role, we maintain the change management portal pages. There's a change proposal master tracker, which I'll go through in a moment. And we also engage with industry expert groups on our changes, whether that be coming to present to give some more information of things they may be interested in, or try to get some feedback on potential solutions. If we go to the next slide. So here are the change analysts. So we are the REC professional services, but we also have REC technical services that input, and performance assurance as well, who input into the changes. So depending on the nature of the change, if it's technical, we may not be the solution lead, but we will be your main point of contact. Now, all of these spaces are on our change documentation as well as contact details. So if you have any questions, you can direct them to one of us. And if it isn't in our expertise, we've had it from other areas of the Code Manager, then we can also put you in touch with the right people for the right information. If we go on to the next slide. So different change categories. So under the REC, we have the schedules, so Schedule 1 to 31. They are Category 1 documents. And we also have Category 2 documents, which are more your sort of service specifications and technical documentation. Now, the change process, a Category 1 and 2 document is treated exactly the same. So they will have sort of an R number, and they will go through a very similar process that James is going to talk about in a little bit more detail. And then you have Category 3 documents. So these are more of your user guides, operational guidance documents, and these go through a separate change process that is a bit more streamlined. However, those changes can only be raised by the code manager, so you won't get the option to raise it yourself on the portal. But if there was any interest in raising a Category 3 document, you can always come and speak to us about that. So to get another idea of what sort of the process may look like, we have self-governance changes or authority-determined changes. So a change will be classed as either one of those. So with a self-governance change, it will go through the sort of end-to-end process that James is going to talk about, and then that final decision will be made in-house by one of our expert panels. However, with an authority-determined change, following that full process, it will then go to Ofgem to make that final determination. The code manager will give a recommendation that's sort of either agreed by that expert panel. However, at the end of the day, Ofgem will make that decision. And then in terms of timescales, they will be an urgent or a standard timescale. So urgent meaning the criteria that Ofgem publishes, and standard will just be, it will be dependent on the nature of the change and how quickly that needs to be put through into code. Go on to the next slide. So the ways you can most easily engage and self-serve is via the REC portal. So if you get a login, you can go to the change and release pages. And as you can see along just in the middle there, you've got to go to change management, change register, and then REC release. So if change management, you'll find most of your details. That's where you'll find consultations, impact assessments, etc. And right in the middle, you'll see a change register, and that is to download an easily accessible tracker, which will list all the changes, the different stages that they're at. And so you can have a look there as a first point of call. So just if we go to the next slide, I'll show you where the change management area is. So the first large tile there is the change register. So if you click on that, you'll find all of the changes, all of the R numbers from the start of the REC. And if you click on the particular change, you can find all the information, documentation, latest update, lead analyst, technical analyst, all of that information all in the one spot. You'll also see in the middle, there's consultations and impact assessments. So if you're following the REC change bulletin, we'll notify stakeholders of when a consultation or impact assessment goes out. That will provide you the link to this section, and you'll get the list of them. And you'll click on that. You can then download a form with questions and then re-upload that so you can engage in the process. The other thing I wanted to highlight on this slide is that the orange tile, raise, rec, issue or change. So if you did want to raise your own change or issue, so an issue being something that's not fully defined, you may just have a problem statement that needs some solution development, or a change, which is a fully formed change and then can go straight through to the change process. Go on to the next slide. So this is just an idea of what the change register looks like. So you'll see all the R numbers there. We're at the latest of the most recently raised items there. Click on that and you'll find all the information that you need to engage with the change proposal. That is the next slide. And I'll hand over to James then.
Thank you very much, Lee. Good morning, everyone. So I'll talk through a bit more about what the change process looks like and the different stages that are involved when a change is raised. It's important to note that for our change process, it is different for every change because different changes come with different requirements, different levels of solutions already formed. And also, we're always looking for ways to improve our change process as well. So we're always looking for ways to speed things up, allow for more engagement. But this map here gives you sort of an idea of what a typical change proposal may go through and looks like. So once the change proposal has been raised, there'll be something called an initial assessment report. And I'll talk about this in more detail later on, but this is sort of the first report that the code manager will produce, setting out what the change is, what it's looking to resolve, and also sets out what steps of this change process will be included in the change. Then we move on to solution development. Now, if a change hasn't come with a solution and just a problem statement, for example, this period will allow the code manager to engage with industry and work with the proposer and wider industry to form a solution and find the requirements. This can be done through sort of using requests for informations, or quite commonly we will put together work groups to allow different members of industry to come together to provide their views and opinions and work together to create a solution. once a solution has been formed or agreed, we'll put this out to party impact assessment, so we can fully understand what impacts there are on different parties and the REC as a whole. This will look at the costs and benefits and suitability of the solution, and is the first, unless you're in the working group, it's the first point of real engagement in the change process. After the impact assessment stage, we move on to the preliminary change report. And this is where we take all the work's being done in the solution development and consider all the responses to the impact assessment and produce our initial report on where we think this change is going to go and our recommendation on how to implement the solution, when to implement the solution, and also provide the business case for this. And this will draw on all the engagement we've had and all the previous information we've gained throughout solution development and the impact assessment stages. Once we've produced the preliminary change report, we'll issue it for consultation, and this is another opportunity for industry to engage with the code manager and our recommendations. And again, we'll ask for questions around the suitability of the solution, any impacts you expect, and whether you agree with the problem statement, the solution provided, or if you have any other comments on the change and the change path. Following consultation, the code manager will review all the responses again and put this together in the final change report, where, if need be, we will make amendments to the solution and also provide more information about sort of what's needed for the implementation. Again, plenty of engagement throughout this, and I'll talk a little bit more about the final change report in a sec as well. That final change report will then go to the responsible committee. Now, the responsible committee is involved throughout the whole change process, and it's the committee that basically votes on these reports and votes on the recommendations that we make, and effectively then approve the change proposal and the solution that we brought forward. We have 4 different responsible committees that are sort of specialised in different areas. So, for example, we've got the metering expert panel that's focusing on sort of the smart metering and metering operations. We've got the performance assurance board, which focuses on performance assurance, the technical expert panel, obviously on technical changes, and then the change panel, which oversees sort of the wider changes to the REC. That final change report will be taken to one of these committees, who then vote on the final change report and ultimately determine the outcome of the change proposal. If it's obviously authority determined, as Elise explained earlier, we have self-governance and the authority path, then that decision will then be passed on to Ofgem for final approval. Once this change process is complete, we also have another stage, which is about the release. So there'll be an implementation date in the final change report that is approved and agreed upon, and that's normally, it will be in one of our scheduled REC releases throughout the year. Prior to the release, we will host a release webinar as well to talk through what actually that implementation is, anything that you need to do to prepare for this, and they'll all be engaged throughout the process as well. And then obviously we'll know the release date and the implementation date of when these changes go live. And that will be the final stage of this change process overview. If you can move on to the next slide, please. So there's 3 key documentations that will be published throughout the change process, and I've just touched upon these. So we've got the initial assessment report, the preliminary change report, and the final change report. And these documentations are the most important part of the change process because they set out what we're doing and also provide an opportunity for you to engage with any of the change proposals. So I'll just explain quickly what each of these reports are and what their purpose is. So the initial assessment report that comes at the very start of the change process. This is where we'll define the problem statement and solution requirements, identify the impacts to REC products, parties, service providers, and whether there's any cross-code impacts as well, as obviously we do sometimes get changes which impact the REC and other industry codes. The initial assessment report will also determine the change path, so that's deciding whether it is authority determined or self-governance, and the responsible committee, as they're one of the 4 committees I mentioned earlier. The initial assessment report will also include the change proposal plan, and this plan sets out the activities and timetable for the change proposal. So in this plan, it will inform you when we intend to go to impact assessment, consultation, and when the preliminary change report and final change report is published. So obviously after the solution development and impact assessments, or if a fully formed solution was provided with the initial assessment report, we'll move to the preliminary change report. This report provides a bit more background on the change proposal and any analysis undertaken. So this could be talking about the work groups, any impact assessments, or any requests for information we may have done. The preliminary change report will also set out the proposed solution and the summary of impact assessments and the cost benefit analysis. It will then look forward to the remaining process stages of the process. So it will set out our plan for consultation, including the dates, and also provide the code manager's minded to recommendation, so our initial recommendation. The preliminary change will also set out the proposed implementation date as well. However, all the information in the preliminary change report is consulted on and may change before the final change report. So the final change report will basically be an updated version of the preliminary change report based on what we received from the consultation. It will also include the collated consultation responses and the code manager response to any comments or issues raised. The final change report will also confirm if there's been any changes made to the solution since the preliminary change report. And then finally, we'll make our final recommendation for the responsible committee. And the key thing to note with these reports is that they're all open for engagement. And when they're published onto the REC portal, any members of any REC party has the opportunity to comment and provide their opinion on this as well. Let's move on to the next slide, please. But obviously, that's not the only engagement with the change process. We really want to make sure that there's much engagement as possible in the change process, and we understand how important that is for all REC parties. So to summarise the different engagement options, there's obviously the invitation to comment on the initial assessment report, the impact assessment that everyone is allowed to respond to, again, invitation to comment on the preliminary change report, and all these comments will be reviewed by the responsible committees as well. We'll also have the consultation, and then again, a chance to comment on the final change report. All of this is done through the REC portal, but also we're happy to take any comments via directly to the change analyst through your OAMs or any of the shared inboxes. If we move on to the next slide, please. So that was the formal way to engage with the REC change process, and any views captured in that formal engagement obviously are included in our reports and considerations, but there's also additional engagements and communications that we make sure are included in the change process. So for example, our main form of communication is the weekly REC change bulletin, which is emailed out at 12 p.m. every Friday. And in this bulletin, we set out anything that's been published, any decisions that have been made, and any sort of updates that may be important for each individual change. So it's a really good way to see what's happened in the previous week and also the timescales of what's coming up as well. You can obviously also engage with the operational account managers who are more than happy to assist with any query on the change process, and us change analysts engage a lot with the OAMs as well to take back views and work with them to resolve any issues or queries. Similarly, you can raise any questions and queries through the REC portal service desk. And then finally, we also have the release webinars I mentioned earlier. So once a change has been approved for implementation, prior to the implementation, the release webinars will set out what the change is, what's happening, and anything that you need to do. And all of this information as well is summarised in the REC podcasts as well, which can be found on the REC portal. Next slide, please. So that is a sort of a brief overview of the change process. As I said at the start, it does vary from change to change, so it's difficult to pinpoint exactly what, if you were to raise a change, what that process would look like. But there is plenty of information on the portal as well. So there's some useful links here that will help you fully understand the change process and the changes that have already been raised and are sort of coming as well. So the change register, as Elise showed you earlier, will list all the current and historic change proposals. There's also an interactive change management user guide, which is really useful, and it will sort of take you step-by-step guide as well, and also how to engage with the REC portal. And also the REC bulletins, we do keep a copy of all previous ones on the portal as well. So if you are new to this completely and want to look back to see what's happened previously, there's a really good place to sort of get up to date with all the changes that are currently in flight or have been implemented. And alternatively as well, any questions on the change process or any particular changes, the change analysts are always more than happy to help. So you can feel free to contact any of us and we'll assist as best as we can.
Thank you, James. We are into the next part of the questions now, I believe, and we do have a few that have come through. I'm going to take the one at the bottom first, and I think I'm going to work my way up. So the first one from Kwaku. it's possible to give some examples of successful changes made and how users influenced and contributed to the process. I know we've had 65 successfully implemented changes, I think, looking at the change register, but I wondered if there's any particular examples that anyone would like to give.
Yeah, I might be able to give some insight into some of the recent ones that I have seen. Now, I think some of the successes were from the engagement. So we've had R92. So whilst it hasn't completely gone through the process, but is at the end of it, we did have a sort of specialised work group that helped develop those changes with the proposer. So, you know, heavily sort of lots of people were able to input their thoughts, as well as doing the normal sort of change process with impact assessments. So that's one. And also some of the SSTEP changes, we've just had one approved yesterday, so it's at the top of my mind. But we had work groups, we had special rec issues groups for this change, RFIs, we did lots of processing just to make sure that useful process types were, you know, so that suppliers day-to-day could be made easier. So, you know, heavily input into how that solution looked. So there's two I can think of. I don't know if anybody else has any other thoughts. Feel free to chip in.
Yes, plenty of discussions that happen at the sort of committees that we have, as the committees are very well engaged at a technical level early in the solution development stages. We also have a couple of open forums beyond those sort of representative nominated committees, one called the Rec Issues Group, where we are frequently now bringing issues early in the cycle to that group and getting feedback from parties on the approach to be taken. And also in the metering space, we have an electricity and a gas operational metering forum that meet quarterly, and again an early opportunity for the code manager to bring potential changes to that group, or for parties to raise issues to that group themselves. We've seen a lot of really good success of contribution towards solutions at those groups. Yeah, hopefully that's answered the question. As I said, work my way up. Graham, next, what governance and actions do RECO take to ensure that change process is managed in a timely manner? Did you want to take that one, James?
Yeah, I can answer that one. So as part of the change proposal plan, it goes to the governance committee, the responsible committee, which is always the change panel for the change proposal plan. So it's not exactly RECO, but it sort of falls within the process. So when we propose these change proposal plans, they have milestones in place, which basically sets out when we're going to do something by. And the responsible committee will obviously comment and vote on these change proposal plans. So they basically say, okay, we're happy with that timescale. These are your milestones. You're now required to meet those milestones. Obviously, the responsible committee can also question those change proposal plans as well. And if they think that we're taking too long and it could be in a more timely manner, then they will say so and make that recommendation. So these milestones are sort of, we're held to account on these milestones. And if we miss one, obviously RECO will engage with RECO, but also we'll have to go back to panel with an explanation of why it's been missed and what the new timescale will look like as well. So sort of the responsible committees will make sure that the change process is managed in a timely manner.
And just to add to that as well, RECO do chair the change panel, and we also report on service levels into RECO across a number of metrics as well. But I see, Graham, that you've added some further context to R113, which I believe is one of Elise's changes, so Elise can give some context on that change.
Thank you very much. So R113 was raised by for the proposer is Rec Technical Services. And they have been compiling a list of updates and clarifications to the data specification, which they sort of manage. So we are now in a position, though, with that one to raise some milestones. So we've just kicked off that process. We've got that that list of the scoped sort of solution that's going to go into that change proposal. So whilst it was code manager, there were no milestones. We were still in that solution development phase, and that was managed just, you know, code manager to code manager. But you will see milestones within the next, say, 2 weeks on that one. So it is now moving throughout the process.
Could I just come back
Thanks,
to
Liz.
that,
Thanks,
please?
Graham, for the questions there. I think the next two questions are
Okay.
less sort of change specific. I think I'd probably take both of these. The first from Dot, who is or are the companies behind Reco and the Rec Code Manager? Well, Reco, as I say, it is a company in itself. Reco is a limited company with independently appointed directors, its own sort of objectives, and it's a company. There is no company behind Reco. The funding to Reco comes through the budget and from suppliers, and that's how the funding for Reco exists. But Reco itself is its own limited company. The Rec Code Manager, the Reco do appoint a number of organisations to act as the Rec Code Manager. Diversification of service providers, but attempts to have the code managers acting as a single entity. So for all intents and purposes, you shouldn't be dealing with individual brands of the organisations that sit underneath it. You're dealing with the code manager as a single entity. However, you've asked the question directly. I will answer directly. The three companies that provide the service to the code manager at the moment are Deloitte, Capgemini, and GemServe. But as I say, you'll never see those brands used when you're dealing with the code manager. You'll only see the Retail Energy Code Manager brand being used, because that's the single code manager approach that we want to give out. And finally, a question from Elliot. Long time no speak, Elliot. Hope you're doing well. Have there been any discussions or developments under the REC around facilitating distribution connected flexibility, e.g. registrations for virtual lead parties? I think that's probably getting a bit too deep for the session today. I know there was a change raised, I think last year, around EES access for VLPs, which was implemented, I believe. Elise is confirming next to me. But I'm sure that we can pick up with you directly after this session in terms of how any further discussions are ongoing with respect to that subject matter area. So we'll be in touch after the session, Elliot, unless there's anything really sort of high level that you wanted an answer on today. But I think probably best that we take that one afterwards. All right, any final questions, or we'll probably move on for now and pick up any further questions at the end, I think. So for now, for the time being, we're heading over to Ros, who's going to provide an overview of EMAR and the digital rec. Ros.
Cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Rosalind Timpley. I'm from the REC Technical Design Authority team, and I'm going to tell you all about the digital rec. So if we move to our next slide. Here we go. So essentially in this section, I'm going to show you the digital navigator, the home of the digital rec, and take you through the rec schedules, the rec data specification, and our newest addition to the digital navigator, Erin. So if we move on to our next slide. So here is the REC portal. So to access the digital navigator, as Paul explained earlier, there's a couple of menu options on the left-hand side of the REC portal menu there, circled in the box. So you can click on EMAR, digital rec and data specification, or go directly to our Erin tab by selecting Erin. And once you click on those, it will take you over to the digital navigator dashboard, which is shown on our next slide. So here we have the dashboard. You can see we've got along the top there different tabs. So we're currently looking at the schedules tab. There's a few others there that you can click to as well. You can also go back to the REC portal. There's an option at the very top of the screen there to go back. In terms of this tab here, the schedules, what we have is it's the REC legal text here. And we've grouped them by theme. So for example, if you're interested in a particular topic, say metering, you could click on metering arrangements from that menu in the left-hand menu on the left-hand side and see all the metering related schedules. Or if you just wanted a complete list with everything in schedule number order, you can go right to the bottom of that menu and click on all, and then scroll down to find the schedule you're interested in. And then once you click on a schedule, it'll bring it up on a new page. So if we move on to our next slide. Here we are on Rec Schedule 13, transfer of consumer data. What we're going to do is move from left to right following the numbers. So on the very left-hand side, number 1, we've got the navigation pane. So if you know a specific section that you want to go straight to, you can use that to click right down to it. Number 2 there is our schedule version history table. So you can see this is version 2.0 of the schedule, which was published in July 2022. Moving down to number 3, we have the legal text itself. So obviously this is much longer if you scroll down. And within that legal text, you can click on those underlined words there. All those defined terms are underlined, so you can immediately look up those definitions if you wish to. Then going up to number 4, if you want to view the text in a non-digitalized format, you can click on that icon next to number 4 there, and it will download in Word. And then moving across finally to number 5, that's our Rec version. So we're currently viewing Rec version 3.10.0, and we've got a drop-down menu there. So if you wanted to view an earlier version of the Rec, you can use that drop-down to look at that. So effectively, you've got your schedule version number, which increments each time the schedule changes, and that Rec version number, which increments each time the wider Rec changes there. Now, if we move on to our next slide. So we've headed back to the Digital Navigator dashboard here, and now we're on the Rec data specification. Similar to the schedules, on the left-hand side, you've got groupings for the various different documents that sit within the Rec data specification. So we do offer separate data specification training because there's a lot in here. So this is just be a light introduction to the data specification navigation here. But if you did want to deep dive into this, we do offer separate training there. So you've got the different documentation on the left-hand side. If you go across to the right where you see data specification search, if you wanted to look for a particular market message, you could type in the name or the reference number in that box. Or if you were to click on the underlined text that says data specification search, it will bring up a complete list of all the market messages, which is what we have on the next slide. If we move on to that one. So here is that complete list. There are a very large number of market messages in the Rec. And what these are is essentially clearly defined file formats for the sharing of information between industry parties. Again, following the numbers, so starting on the left of the screen, you can choose here what you'd like to search. So we have the market messages. This is what's currently displayed. You could switch to scenario variants, or you could look up the data items. So if you click on each of those, you'll get a complete list of all the items. Number 2 is the search box. So if you wanted to, we're currently clicked on market messages. So if you wanted to search a market message, you could type in a search term here. It can be a word, a reference number, and it'll bring up everything that fits. Or you might be interested in a particular set of flows that go from and to certain target and source, such as ones that go from suppliers to distributors, in which case you can filter the target and source, and that will bring up that exact list of flows for you there. So if we were to click on any of these market messages, it will give us more details on them. So if we just press to the next slide, here we go. So let's say we've clicked on the first one that was in the list, which was market message 00001, request metering system investigation. You can see the legacy reference. So that's the format used pre-Rec, which is still in existence and used within the messages themselves. So this is a D0001 flow. There's a description there about what this market message does. You've got a list of the data items, and then you've got the scenario variants themselves. And these are new for Rec. They didn't exist pre-Rec arrangements. And a scenario variant is essentially the market message with the source and the target for that message. So what we now have is an ability to have messages vary depending on the source and target for it, and each has its own unique ID. That's the variant ID. And if you click on any scenario variant, it will bring up details of the market message. So if we just move on to the next slide. Here we have the scenario variant going from distribution network operator to half-hourly data collector. And we've got a bit of information at the top. So you can see in the box that says owner there, balancing settlement code. So the REC data specification contains a single source of energy industry market messages, but they're not necessarily all REC owned. So in this particular circumstance, it's the balancing settlement code company that owns this market message. So if you wanted to make a change to this, it would go through the relevant BSC process, and then they'd notify us. We'd apply it within the REC data specification. And at the very bottom of the screen there, we've got the message structure. So this is effectively sets out a clearly defined format for that message, so that no matter which organisation sends or receives it, it is machine readable, because it's all done in a consistent manner between machines creating those messages. And you can see towards the right of this bottom table, it's got a list of the data items. You can click on those to find out more about the individual data items. So here we have it, the MPAN core, the first one in the message. So we can see this is owned by the REC. So if you wanted to change this one, it would be a retail energy code change. It's a unique reference number for a metering system, and it's 13 characters long. And then there's a table there that lists all the market messages that this appears in. So that's the data specification. If we move to our next slide, I'm going to move on to the final tab that we're going to look at on the Digital Navigator. That's the ERIN tab. So this was added relatively recently, and ERIN answers questions about the REC using artificial intelligence. If we just move to the next slide. There we go. So we've got in the Hi, I'm Erin box at the top, there's a little bit at the end that you can click on there, click here, and it pops up a do's and don'ts for asking Erin questions. And it's giving you some advice to get the best from Erin. For example, by using REC terminology where you can, it helps you get a better answer to your question. And also there's a disclaimer at the bottom of the screen. So this explains that ERIN uses natural language processing, which is a form of AI. This does have limitations, so ERIN shouldn't be used instead of the REC, but alongside it as a help you search it. And you can click on the text of that disclaimer there at the very end to get a pop-up box that lists every single source document that ERIN is consulting when it generates your answers. So it's quite a long list there. You can see we're at the very top in terms of scrolling. There's quite a few documents in there that it's looking at. And every time there's a REC release, those documents are updated to reflect the changes. So it's always providing you with up-to-date answers to your questions. So if we click onto our next slide, we're going to ask Erin a question. Here we go. So we've typed in, how do I resolve an erroneous transfer? I haven't used the right REC term there. It should be erroneous switch, but that's okay. Erin's recognised that and given me an answer explaining the erroneous switch process. And then it also has a plus minus with sources next to it. So if you want to then navigate to the relevant legal text, you can press the plus. It'll bring up the source documents from the REC, and then you can open those and view the legal text itself. Whenever you use Erin, please do give feedback. There's a thumbs up and a thumbs down icon there. If you do the thumbs down, there'll be a little box that gives you an optional opportunity to type in why you're giving it a thumbs down. Our development team behind Erin review all that feedback, and it's used as part of our continuous improvement process. So the more you tell us how you find Erin, the better we can make it for you. And so that is an introduction to the Digital Navigator. I'm going to hand back to Paul for the Q&A.
Thank you, Ros. I think there are a couple of questions that have come through. I'm not sure if you might have kind of answered Graham's question, but perhaps we can be some more specific answer here. So how do I link the schedule or business process to a specific market message scenario?
So in the legal text, you have a so you have the tables that define the processes, and they do make reference the message. So it'll say, trying to think of an example. So you might have that the supplier should do something, send something to the distributor, then it'll have a means column, and that means will list the data flow. So it's not the scenario variant number, but it's telling you the from and the to and the how. with a data flow referenced in those process tables. So for example, the metering operations schedule has a very large number of those process tables, if you wanted to look for an example one.
The follow-up question there, yes, reference message, not scenario. See schedule 14. Perhaps if there's something specific there, we can follow up with Graham Ross in terms of an issue if he's having an issue.
Yep, very happy to follow up separately, Graham. But yeah, it's not the scenario, it is the message that's listed in the legal text.
Okay. The other question on there from Elliot, Electrolink has a DTC website. Is that basically the same as the REC market messages specification?
It is. So the REC brings together not just the DTC message, but other sources. We've got the CSS messages in there, and we've got, for example, the ExoServe IX market messages. So the Electrolink site has just the DTC ones because they operate the data transfer network. So it doesn't have the full set of market messages. But when we update the REC data specification, we tell Electrolink what's changed so that they can make sure those revised DTN market messages can go over the DTN. So what they're reflecting on their website should exactly match the DTN element, but not the wider REC messages, just those over the DTN.
Thank you, Ros. And from Namatha, are you planning to include market-wide half-hourly assessment messages in the data specification tab?
I believe so. I would have to take this one away and check with my colleagues, but I know a lot of work is going on the impacts of market-wide half-hourly settlement on the market messages. So my understanding is that that is the intention to add those in.
I think Harriet's gonna try and pick some of that up in the next session on MHHS specifically. And a bit of feedback from Graham there on not linking the business process to the message scenario makes the REC unusable. As I say, we take that feedback and perhaps, Ros, we can follow up and discuss that issue with Graham offline. But thank you for your feedback, Graham.
Great, thank you.
Okay, we'll move ahead now then onto the next agenda item for today, and I'm joined by my colleague Harriet, who's going to be talking us through the an overview of the market-wide half-hourly settlement progress and how it impacts on the REC. Harriet.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, everyone. So I'm Harriet Truss. I'm a member of the change team in the code manager, but also have a specific role linking into the REC project to do our part for the implementation of the market-wide half-hourly settlement programme. So Paul, if you go on to the first slide. Brilliant, thank you. So the market-wide half-hourly settlement programme has come from the significant code review on electricity settlement reform, which started back in 2017. The market-wide half-hourly settlement looks to use the opportunity that smart metering can give for more granular data and how that can be used for new products and services based on the time of use of consumers, basically. There's obviously a lot of positive outcomes from that. It can also means that there can be a reduced settlement timetable for the actual settlement back to the billing is a shorter time frame, and those benefits can be sought through that. So it was back in April 2021 that Ofgem published a decision to progress from that initial significant code review work to the MHHS programme, which has been set up to implement the new target operating model that was recommended out of that activity. And Elexon were appointed as the overall management of that programme, and the senior responsible owner for the programme and a kind of leading on the programme. As part of that, the REC and other code bodies have obligations as well to make sure that that what needs to happen from a REC point of view, we're responsible for delivering that, and that's where the RECO programme has been put in place, and that's kind of where I plug into on behalf of the code manager, along with other code manager colleagues, kind of across the various parts of the manager, with the technical side, data specification elements, and performance assurance and things like that. So Paul, do you want to go on to the next slide? This is a kind of a very high level slide, but just kind of really visualises the benefits behind the market-wide half-hourly settlement programme and the drivers for that. So it kind of reiterates kind of what I've said already, but I thought it's useful for people to have, and obviously you have the slides afterwards as well. We'll go on to the next slide. Brilliant. I think that this is the really kind of key slide. There's a short amount of time available today. The MHHS programme obviously has a lot of different components, but the key things for you as kind of people who are new to the REC is understanding kind of what it means in the context of the REC and yourselves. So the key dates to be aware of are the MHHS go live. So that's when the central systems are ready for migration to the new arrangements to be put in place, and also the code changes that go alongside that. So from a REC perspective, there's REC services like the central switching service, the electricity inquiry service, that are impacted, and the changes are being progressed there, but also across the REC and the schedules and the operational documents, there's updates that need to be made to how the processes work and the obligations on parties, and they also go live alongside the central systems. And that's targeted for March with a contingency of a 3-month contingency there, but the key date that at the moment everyone's working to is the 7th of March. And the programme are obviously tracking that through, and we're all inputting to that. After that go live, which is when obviously the obligations are in the codes, and so it's also the balancing and settlement code and DCUSA as well, changes going in across there. Once all of that's in place, then the suppliers can start migrating MPANs over to the new arrangements. With migration, that's due to start very soon after that initial go live, and there's an 18-month window during which that will happen. Obviously, that all MPANs will move over to the new arrangements, and that's that's a high number of and a large amount of activity. So that's going to be spread across that 18-month period. In order to be able to start migration and complete migration, parties will need to be qualified under MHHS, so that process starts. So some people are involved in the systems integration testing, the early testing within the programme, so they'll be qualified as part of that. But then for those that aren't involved in that systems integration testing, the qualification processes start from January next year, and again run alongside and slightly ahead of, and closing down slightly ahead of the migration. The key message here essentially is that suppliers can't migrate their MPANs over if they're not qualified, and also metering equipment managers won't be able to service MPANs in the new arrangements if they're not qualified. So qualification is absolutely key to this for REC parties, and that's under the REC and the BSC, and the two code bodies are working very closely together to make that and make all those arrangements really clear for everyone, but also to make sure that kind of the two align and can progress to get people in the right position. Once kind of all of that's happened, people are qualified, MPANs are migrated over to new arrangements, the new settlement timetable will be put in place, and that's where I said before the shorter window. So currently it's a 13-month settlement window, and that would drop back to 4 months, and that's targeted for December 26. So I've covered off a couple of these key messages already, but in terms of distribution network operators, they all need to be qualified prior to go live. Obviously, MPANs can be spread across all over different regions, and so that's part of the qualification requirements for distribution network operators. Suppliers and metering equipment managers, as I said, anybody and everybody that wants to operate in the market within the new arrangements must be qualified before they can migrate and service MPANs and provide contracts to consumers. And then there's also there's the qualification piece to make sure that everyone's kind of aligned for being able to migrate MPANs. But from the point of go live, there are some processes that everybody needs to be able to support. So one of the things in the programme is that is known as reverse migration, and that's where an MPAN has already been migrated by one supplier. That supplier then may lose that MPAN, but actually it's the gaining supplier is one who hasn't got the arrangements in place or isn't in a position for that particular MPAN to support it in the new arrangements, and that needs to be supported. So the switches can happen, kind of moving backwards into the existing arrangements, and the other part of that, those processes that need to be in place for everybody, is where a migration happens as part of a switch. So the losing supplier, there's certain elements to the losing supplier who those losing supplier processes and meter equipment processes that need to support that they're losing into the new arrangements. There's additional information that needs to be detailed in there. So I think the key message on this slide is essentially it does affect everybody, and particularly if you want to be operating in the market going forwards and getting up to speed if you're not already, and engaging with the programme is really key, and that's kind of why I'm here today, to make sure that this is on your radar as you join the REC. So Paul, if you go on to the next slide. Cool. This is kind of an industry-led programme, and under the programme, that's where the key contact point is. So they have a programme participant coordinator team, and they're really your first point of call. If you're not involved at all, speak to them first. If you are kind of already kind of engaged with that and know what's going on, but you've got specific questions around the REC side of MHH qualification, you can contact us via our normal service desk team, and they'll put you through to the performance assurance team to support you on that. Obviously, our operational account managers are also kind of fully aware of everything going on in the programme, and will be able to support you into signposting you to the right contacts and answering questions as well. We do have some dedicated wiki pages on market-wide half-hourly settlement ourselves in the REC, but there's also the market-wide half-hourly settlement programme websites as well. But as I say, I think really at this point, for people that are new, contacting that participant coordinator team is the real key thing. I think that's me.
All right. Thank you very much, Harriet. Appreciate your overview there. Moving on the slides. No questions at the moment, but please do raise any questions if you have them for Harriet. Yes, Harriet was going to address the question related to the data specification from before. So let me just mute up again.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, sorry, I meant to do it before I signed off. So with regards to data specification and the question around whether the DIP messages, the data integration platform, which is the new messaging system that's being introduced as part of MHHS, those messages are being the EMAR is the place where those messages will be stored, and that central place alongside all the other market messages. Exactly how that's reflected in the tabs and everything on the EMAR, as Ros went through before. I don't have the specifics on that, but more and more of that information will be becoming available over the coming months. But yes, absolutely, EMAR will be the central place for those messages alongside everything else. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you for confirming, Harriet. Okay, as we move into the last session for today, I've just opened a feedback poll on Slido as well. So if you go to the tab, you'll be able to just let us know what you thought went well about the session today, any ideas for improvements as we look to continue to roll these sessions out more regularly going forward. But I'm just going to recap, finalise the session today by looking on different ways you can continue to engage with the Code Manager and the REC following today's session, and just a number of things that we've touched on in some respect today, but I just want to flag again, draw your attention back round to. Your first way in is usually going to be through the service desk. If you've got a question or query that you want us to answer, please do raise it with the service desk. You can do it via the REC portal or the live chat on the REC portal, or you can send us an email to inquiries@recmanager.co.uk. We have service levels to turn around your queries within a very short period of time, within sort of 3 days in terms of the first request. So you can expect a prompt and thorough answer from us, and we can always triage your query to other parts of the REC sort of infrastructure if it relates to a service provider or something as well. So I do encourage you to use that route where you can. We do, as I said before, trying to make as much information as self-serve as possible through the REC portal and through the REC wiki on the portal as well. We're actually just kicking off a project right now on the REC portal to overhaul the user experience, the user interface on the portal, and Digital Navigator EMAR as well, to make them more aligned, more modern, more easy to navigate, and bring the really important information up front. So you can expect to see some
being done last year.
It's still we have started work. We did some user surveys last year, and that's now led into a project to actually deliver some actual tangible improvements throughout the next few months. So you can expect to see some improvements coming soon. We mentioned that the OEMs, the operational account managers, every REC party and service user has them. We encourage you to meet regularly with them, raise your questions. We're rolling out a process across the code manager and across the service providers as well to identify the most critical messages that our OEMs can support driving out, more so than they have done before even. So you make sure you're using those facilities, those functions through the OEMs to get those most critical messages and provide you with an input into the code manager as well. We run regular events like this, but also more specific events as well. We always run sort of drop-in sessions ahead of REC code change releases to enable you to better understand what's going on. You can keep up to date with those events by signing up to the bulletins, which I'll come on to, or we do have a REC events page on the REC portal as well. I mentioned the committees. We circulate minutes, headline reports, agendas, papers for each of the committees, and you can keep up to date with those publications through the bulletins. But also, as well as those representative committees where they're maybe less accessible, I've mentioned the more accessible groups that you are encouraged to come along to raise issues to attend, to listen, to be informed. Things like the RIG, which meets monthly, the REC Issues Group, the things like the operational metering forums as well, with the gas and electricity version that meet quarterly. And again, keep up to date with those through the REC bulletins. We have the change process as a key way to engage, the ability for you to raise issues, but also to respond through consultation, through impact assessment, right the way through the change process to help us identify which solutions work best for the industry and best for the consumer. Bulletins are at the heart of our communication sort of approach. We, in the very early days of the REC, had feedback that we were sending too many emails out. There was just couldn't see the wood for the trees in terms of the amount of communication that parties were getting. So we introduced the bulletins as a way to aggregate that information so that you had an easy one-stop shop in terms of this is all the key information coming out of the REC. We have 2 bulletins, the general bulletin, which goes out at 10 AM on a Friday, the change bulletin, which goes out at midday on a Friday too, that is more focused at what's going on in the change space. If you're not already signed up, easy to do so. Just send us an email to the service desk and we'll add you onto that list and get those bulletins sent out to you. But I do recommend that you sign up for them if you haven't already. And if you're interested and on LinkedIn, the Code Manager has a profile on LinkedIn as well as our YouTube channel where we publish all the recordings from these sessions within a matter of days following the event. So you can keep up to date even if you haven't been able to come along. Fantastic. I'm going to move forward now to the final part of the session, which is open forum, really, for you to ask any questions that you may have been saving up that you haven't had the opportunity to ask yet. No questions raised yet, but I shall leave the floor open for as long as we can. And the survey, as I said, on feedback is open for you to fill in, and please give us feedback around what whether you've got some value out of today's session and how we can deliver even more value for future sessions as well. Right, I shall leave. I'll stay on the call in case anyone has any questions that they haven't asked yet and want to ask. But thank you very much for your participation today, your feedback, your comments. Really appreciate it. Look out for the recording and the slides that we'll publish in the next couple of days as well. But I really appreciate the time you spent with us today. We do have a useful links page as well at the back of the pack that we send out that you can get to some of the resources we've mentioned. But thank you very much, guys. Appreciate your time.